The fluorescent lights hummed above. Tommy stared out at the empty highway. Rain lashed against the gas station windows. Another night shift, another night alone. Boredom had become a familiar companion. The bell above the door chimed. Tommy looked up, startled. A figure stood silhouetted against the storm. He couldn't make out any features. The man stumbled inside, dripping wet. Water pooled around his feet. Rough night, huh?
The man didn't answer. He just stood there, swaying slightly. His skin glistened, pale and unhealthy. A low groan escaped his lips. Tommy felt a prickle of unease crawl up his spine. The man took a step closer, his eyes wide and vacant, fixed on Tommy. Tommy noticed a gash on his arm, the flesh around it discolored and oddly stiff. The stench hit him then, a wave of rot and decay. Tommy's blood ran cold. This wasn't right. This was all wrong.
Sir, are you all right?
He instinctively moved back, putting distance between himself and the strange man. The air felt thick with tension, every second stretching into an eternity.
Can I help you with something? The words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to maintain normalcy in a situation that was anything but.
The man lurched forward, another groan escaping his throat. His eyes, milky and lifeless, seemed to pierce through the very fabric of reality. His jaw hung slack, revealing teeth stained a gruesome yellow. The sight was enough to churn Tommy's stomach. He lunged. Tommy barely had time to react, his mind racing to comprehend the horror unfolding before him. He threw his hands up, pushing the man back with all the strength he could muster. The contact was jarring, a stark reminder of the danger he was in. The force of it was surprising. The man stumbled, his eyes never leaving Tommy. It was as if he was driven by an unrelenting hunger. Tommy scrambled back, knocking over a display of candy bars. The clatter echoed through the store, amplifying his panic. His heart pounded in his chest. He scanned the aisles frantically for something, anything to defend himself with. The dim lighting made everything seem more sinister, shadows dancing mockingly around him. His eyes landed on the baseball bat he kept behind the counter. It was his only hope, a gift from his nephew, meant for happier times. Memories of sunny afternoons and laughter flashed through his mind, a stark contrast to the present horror. Tommy grabbed the bat, gripping it tight. The familiar weight was comforting, a small anchor in the storm of chaos. He felt a surge of adrenaline, primal and terrifying. His senses were heightened, every sound and movement magnified. The man was closer now, dragging his feet, his arms outstretched. The smell of decay was overwhelming, a sickening reminder of the unnatural state of his attacker. The smell was overwhelming. Tommy swung the bat, connecting with the man's shoulder with a sickening thud. The impact reverberated through his arms, a testament to the force he had used. The man didn't even flinch. It was as if he felt no pain, driven solely by an insatiable hunger. Tommy's mind raced, realizing the true extent of the nightmare he was facing. He just kept coming. Tommy swung again, this time aiming for the head. The bat met its target with a dull crack. The man stumbled back, momentarily stunned. But he wasn't down. He shook his head, as if clearing cobwebs, and let out a guttural roar. It wasn't human. It was something else, something monstrous. Fear clawed at Tommy's throat. He backed away, keeping the bat raised. The front windows of the gas station suddenly exploded inward. Shards of glass flew everywhere. Tommy ducked, shielding his face. When he looked up, he saw them, more of them. They surged through the broken window, a tide of rotting flesh and vacant eyes. They were everywhere, lurching and groaning, drawn to him like moths to a flame. Tommy felt a scream rise in his chest, a primal scream of terror. This couldn't be happening, it couldn't be real. But it was all too real. Tommy backed into the stockroom, slamming the door shut just as the first of them reached him. He could hear them clawing at the door, their moans growing louder, more insistent. He scrambled to drag a heavy shelf in front of the door, creating a makeshift barricade. It wouldn't hold them for long. He was trapped. The gas station, his once boring sanctuary, was now his prison. Desperation clawed at him. He needed to get out. He needed to escape. But how? He scanned the room, his eyes frantically searching for an escape route. There had to be a way out. There was always a way out. His gaze fell on a small hatch in the ceiling, the emergency exit. He'd never used it, never even thought about it, until now.
Tommy grabbed a nearby trash can, heaving it into the air. It crashed against the hatch with a satisfying bang. The flimsy wood splintered, giving way.
He clambered on top of the shelves, reaching for the opening. The air was thick with the stench of decay, the moans of the undead, a constant, terrifying symphony.
He fumbled for the emergency radio on the shelf, his fingers trembling. He managed to switch it on.
Static, he fiddled with the dial, his heart sinking. Then a voice, frantic and breathless, cut through the noise. Emergency broadcaster. Reports. Walking dead. Seek shelter. God help us all. The voice faded, replaced by static again. Tommy dropped the radio, his blood turning to ice. It wasn't just the gas station, it wasn't just some isolated incident. The world was ending, and he was trapped in the middle of it. Panic threatened to consume him. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. He had to get out. He had to survive. The walls seemed to close in around him, the air thick with tension. His mind raced, but he knew he couldn't afford to lose control now. Every second counted.
He pushed the hatch open the rest of the way, hauling himself up into the cramped space above the ceiling tiles. He could hear them below, their frustrated roars echoing around him. The space was tight, barely enough room to move, but he had no choice. He had to keep going. The ceiling tiles creaked under his weight, and he held his breath, praying they wouldn't give way.
The air was thick with dust and the smell of stale air. He crawled through the darkness, following the narrow passageway. His heart pounded in his ears. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan from below sent a jolt of fear through him. He could feel the sweat dripping down his face, mixing with the dust to form a grimy layer on his skin. The passage seemed endless, each inch forward a battle against his own rising panic.
Finally, he saw it. A faint light ahead. The rooftop access door. He scrambled towards it, hope flickering in his chest. He pushed the door open, stumbling out onto the roof. The fresh air hit him like a wave, and he took a deep breath, savoring the momentary relief. But he knew he wasn't safe yet. He had to keep moving.
The storm had intensified, the wind whipping his hair in his face. He looked out at the town below, his breath catching in his throat. The streets were deserted, the buildings dark and foreboding. He could see the storm clouds swirling above, lightning flashing in the distance. He had to find shelter, somewhere safe to hide until the danger passed. But where? The town was a maze of unfamiliar streets and alleys, each one potentially hiding more threats. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the next part of his journey. He had come this far. He couldn't give up now.
The world was on fire. Well, not literally, but it might as well have been. The streets below were choked with them, the walking dead. They swarmed through the town, a ravenous tide of decay. Buildings burned, casting an eerie orange glow against the storm clouds. Screams echoed in the distance, quickly cut short. The familiar streets of my town were now a nightmare landscape. The world I knew, the world of late-night shifts and boring routines, was gone. In its place was something terrifying and unknown. Survival was the only thing that mattered now. He couldn't stay on the roof. He had to keep moving, had to find somewhere safe, somewhere he could hole up and figure out what to do next. But where? He scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of life, any glimmer of hope in the midst of the chaos. And then he saw it. A truck. A beat-up pickup truck, its headlights cutting through the darkness like a beacon. It was speeding down the highway, heading out of town, away from the chaos, away from the dead. It was hope. Tommy didn't hesitate. He raced across the rooftop, his eyes fixed on the truck. It was his only chance. He had to reach it. He reached the edge of the building, the ground seeming miles away. There was no time to hesitate, no time for fear. He took a deep breath and jumped. He landed hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him. Pain shot through his ankles, but he couldn't stay down. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the throbbing in his legs. The truck was getting closer. He had to make it. He lurched into a run, his lungs burning, his legs screaming in protest. The rain lashed against his face, blurring his vision. He could hear them behind him, their moans growing louder. They were closing in.
The truck screeched to a halt beside him. The window rolled down, revealing a face, weathered and grim. A hand reached out, pulling him up into the truck.
Tommy collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. He looked back at the town, at the nightmare he was leaving behind. He had survived, for now. The truck roared back to life, speeding away from the carnage. Tommy looked around at the other occupants. A handful of survivors, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion, but alive. They were all that was left of the world he knew. The memories of their loved ones, their homes, and their past lives haunted them, but they had no choice but to keep moving forward. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was the only path they had. The world had changed. The dead walked the earth, and survival was a fight that was only just beginning. But for now, he was alive, and he would keep fighting, for as long as he could. Every day was a battle, not just against the zombies, but against the despair that threatened to consume them. They had to find food, water, and shelter, all while avoiding the ever-present danger of the undead. It was a relentless struggle, but giving up was not an option.
The truck rumbled down the road towards the rising sun, towards an uncertain future, a future where the only certainty was survival. The landscape was desolate, a stark reminder of the world they had lost. The rising sun offered a glimmer of hope, but it was fleeting. They had to stay vigilant, always ready for the next threat. The road was long and the journey was fraught with danger, but they had each other, and that was something to hold on to.
We made it. For now. The brief moments of respite were precious. A chance to catch their breath and regroup. They knew that the next challenge was just around the corner, but for now, they allowed themselves a moment of relief. It was these small victories that kept them going, a reminder that they were still alive, still fighting.
Yeah, but we can't let our guard down, not for a second. The world was unforgiving, and the slightest lapse in vigilance could be fatal. They had to stay alert, always watching for signs of danger. The zombies were relentless, but so were they. They had to be, if they wanted to survive.
Tommy nodded, looking back at the town one last time. The truck was driving away into the sunrise. The town was still engulfed in chaos. The memories of the life they had left behind were painful, but they had to keep moving forward. The future was uncertain, but they had no choice but to face it head-on.
Keep your eyes open, everyone. We have a long road ahead. The journey was just beginning, and they had to be prepared for whatever came their way. The city was a maze of danger, and they had to navigate it carefully. Every step was a risk, but they had no choice but to keep moving forward.
He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever came next. This was just the beginning. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but they had each other, and that was something to hold on to. They had to stay strong, stay vigilant, and keep fighting. The world had changed, but they were still here, still fighting for survival. And as long as they had each other, they had hope.